Welcome, everybody, to a special event for Darryl W. Perry. He will be going along live with the New Hampshire governor debate. Since, of course, he was not invited to said debate, he will be giving his answers in real time. But we are listening along. You probably will not be hearing much from the actual debate. I will be retransmitting the questions to him, so you'll be able to get the answers from him. So we will now be joining Darryl W. Perry, and if you want to give an opening, they're just kind of talking about intro right now.
Yeah, so thank you again, Darryl W. Perry. I'm the Libertarian for governor of New Hampshire, and New Hampshire Public Radio decided to set some debate criteria that intentionally excluded everyone other than Republican and Democrat, which means that, unfortunately, I'm not in the NHPR studio this morning participating alongside Governor Sununu and Senator Feltus. So I will be providing my answers in real time, and hopefully I'll be able to hear the questions from NHPR and some of the answers provided by the governor and the senator, so that I can actually, have this feel like an actual debate. There is a debate later this evening that I will be participating in with Senator Feltus. And you can go to my website, darrylwperry.com, to learn more about my positions, where I'm running on a platform of criminal justice reform, lower taxes, and protection of voting rights, and reform of ballot access laws.
So we'll join with Sununu's info right now.
Team, Dr. Benjamin Chan, Lori Shibonette, the men and women of the National Guard, the team at Unemployment Security, all these folks that have really come together in a very, very difficult time and gotten results. And, when it comes to the campaign, I understand this frustration on the other side. I understand Dan is frustrated that, Democrats and Republicans across the spectrum are supporting us. He's 20 points down in the polls. And even today, the New Hampshire Democrat Party has pulled his ads on cable TV. But I got to tell you, that is no excuse for the negativity, the attacks, the lies. It's not appropriate. I don't care how down you are in a campaign. You got to talk about the future and what you're bringing, management experience. That's exactly what New Hampshire needs. We've got a lot of challenges ahead of us in 2021, and we're going to be able to tackle them with the right experience, with the right team, and with positivity. I've been transparent and honest every day when I step in front of that camera for the state of New Hampshire, and we're going to keep doing it.
Thank you, Governor Sununu. We'll get into our questions. And Josh Rogers, we're going to start off with you.
Thanks, Laura, and good morning, all.
So they're asking about the COVID pandemic and that there has been a rise in numbers. Of course, they're saying because it's of more testing, and they're asking, should we be tightening up now, or what should the benchmarks be?
So it's a combination of more testing plus people participating in risky behavior. If you look at a lot of the numbers, a lot of the new cases are coming from college campuses, which is very unfortunate. College students, by and large, especially the traditional college student, they believe that they're invincible. And we were all there at one point, right? When we were 19, 20 years old, we thought, we can do anything. Nothing's going to hurt us. We don't need to take any precautions against things. But at the same time, again, yes, there is more testing, but the positive test rate is going up slightly to where it had been about 0.5% of people getting tested were testing positive, and now it's about 1.3%. which in the grand scheme of things doesn't seem that large, but that's almost a 3-time increase. I don't support a government-forced shutdown. I do wish that more private businesses would take the initiative upon themselves to go along with the CDC guidance of mask requirements, physically distancing. I hate the term socially distanced because it seems to imply that we shouldn't be interacting with other humans. Just stay physically distant. And there's been the question of, well, if masks work, why do I need to stay 6 feet apart? And it's one of those things of those are done in conjunction with one another, along with hand sanitizer, where you need to do multiple things to stop the spread. But no, I don't support a government-forced shutdown. I don't support government-forced mask mandates. But those are things that people should do because it's safe and responsible.
So the question they're asking now is, what policies should we deal with when regarding business losses during the pandemic, and what policies should be used going forward to try to re-stimulate that coming back?
Yeah, so this is one of those things to where you're trying to pick winners and losers, right? To where when the governor's original shutdown order came out in March, the governor, along with some bureaucrats, declared certain businesses essential and other businesses non-essential. And those that were essential were allowed to continue operating. Those that were non-essential had to either completely shut down or refocus how they operated. And then, of course, there was the federal response of here's a bunch of money through the PPP loans and just the straight out stimulus. The government should not be involved in public what's the term, socializing losses and privatizing gains. Government should not be picking financial winners and losers. It's a sad thing that certain businesses are going out of business because of this, but unfortunately, businesses go under all the time.
So they're talking about how the UNH poll put Governor Sununu's approval handling the pandemic at over 80%. How do you feel people around are actually feeling towards that?
So, yeah, I do have to give the governor some credit. I'm not going to say that I'm completely pleased with how he handled the pandemic, specifically his use of executive powers and the shutdown orders. I do like some of the suggestions that were made of you are safer at home, which is true. I like some of the orders that were done that, they never should have been regulations in the first place, such as businesses, restaurants specifically, can deliver alcohol with takeout orders or deliveries. That never should have been a restriction in the first place. The legislature needs to fix that. There were also expansions of telehealth and waivers of some of the licensing requirements for healthcare workers coming into New Hampshire that never should have been in place in the first place. Those need to be eliminated again through the legislature.
They're asking about how a lot of the businesses have been kept afloat by federal aid during the height of the unemployment. What would you do to support businesses if money isn't coming from the federal government?
Again, this is something that I touched on a couple answers ago, to where it should not be the job of a government to socialize private business losses, which is unfortunately what we see all too often in this country, specifically at the federal level. There were the auto industry bailouts in the early 2000s. There was the auto industry bailouts in the 1980s. There have been, all kinds of other bailouts, farm subsidies, specifically the latest farm subsidy to give money to farmers that have been hurt by the tariffs that were put in place by President Donald Trump. So, you've got the government that's creating this problem and then trying to solve the problem, when it would be a lot easier to not create the problem in the first place. Or if the problem does happen, just deal with it for a short period of time and then hopefully things recover.
Now they want to talk about how the pandemic has affected elderly what specifically what you had done differently from the governor? That was the question.
Again, and I had mentioned this in one of the candidate surveys that I received. It's easy to play Monday morning quarterback and say, well, the governor should have done this, should have done that, should have done this other thing. Unfortunately, we can't go back in time and undo all of these things unless we find Vermin Supreme with his time machine that's not yet been built. But I understand that people are working on that in the past, present, and in the future. But again, one thing that I would have done differently is I would not have forced businesses to close. I, however, would have encouraged businesses to do the safe, responsible thing and limit the number of customer interactions. Unfortunately, when you have a president that's saying that this pandemic is a Democratic hoax perpetuated by the fake news, you're going to have a large segment of society that just wants to discount anything and be contrarian and do the complete opposite of what is suggested.
So she's asking about the Democratic candidate has talked about how Governor Sununu would like to repeal the ACA, whereas the governor has actually signed on to a lawsuit to defend the ACA.
I will waive any response to that, since that seems to be a direct attack against the governor and his apparent contradictory position.
All right, let's cut in on this for a minute and listen to the response.
Senator Hassan, Senator Shaheen, and the late Senator John McCain voted no in the U.S. Senate, and now he wants to go forward with Judge Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court, and she has a long history of opposition to Obamacare.
Well, and just for the record, Governor Sununu didn't sign on to the Republican governor's letter supporting the nomination of Judge Barrett. But to the other statements, I'll give you 30 seconds, Governor Sununu. What about those previous statements and previous positions that Senator Feltes raises that certainly sound like opposition to the ACA? 30 seconds, please.
Sure. So two things. Let's first talk about the ACA. I agree with most Americans. We're all frustrated that the promises of lower cost with Obamacare didn't come to fruition, and that's a lot of the frustration we expressed early on. But you don't just throw it out, which is exactly why I'm bucking my party's trend, joining just a few Republican governors and fighting to keep the ACA in place. And then there's other provisions in there. Remember, it was the Republicans in 2017 who voted to do Medicaid expansion for the next 5 years. That was us and supporting those types of initiatives. So you have to judge people on their record and hold elected officials accountable to what they do, not just what they say.
And just for the record, Medicaid expansion was a bipartisan effort in the state legislature. Sure. Getting back to long-term care, Senator Feltus, to you, given the serious toll on our elders' physical and mental health that we saw with these shutdowns, I have elderly parents myself in facilities, and it was tough. How would you, as governor, decide whether to clamp down or ease up? What sort of metrics would you use in 30 seconds, please?
Well, you got to listen to the medical experts.
Asking about how
that didn't happen early on.
Difficult for the elderly.
An independent
for this
audit and review
and
was vetoed.
What would you do
with
to
concrete,
decide whether to
would have had
clamp
concrete
down
recommendations
or
how to move forward. And our assisted living facility and nursing home facilities would be devastated by the repeal of Obamacare
like that.
Without a replacement. And that's exactly what that federal legislation in 2017 was.
My grandmother actually lives in a long-term care facility in Hardin, Montana, which is currently being very hard hit by this pandemic.
And now, in order to move forward on long-term care and the entire healthcare system, we need to protect and strengthen
the last
Obamacare,
couple of months.
Make it work for people on the ground.
She told me, I spoke with her last night. She told me that they had 2 days last week
that tough decision
where, because everybody in the facility had negative tests for 3 consecutive days, they had 2 days to where they were allowed out of their room for a couple of hours.
Well, 30 seconds, please.
And
you need to listen to the medical experts.
The reason it was only 2 days is because several of the staff at the facility wound up testing positive
on a continuous
for
ongoing
COVID.
basis.
And so everybody went back into the self-isolation, which I can understand. If you're in the facility, that will feel like a quarantine where all of your meals are being brought to you. So it seems to me that some of the long-term care facilities and nursing homes are doing the right thing, whereas some of the facilities are just being very lackadaisical here. And I wish that more long-term care facilities were taking these precautions to keep the at-risk population that's living in their care safe.
Nunu will be giving a response at the moment in regards to that topic.
Spread low, and
can you
that
go live
extends
to
to
his
nursing
response?
home, universal testing. What do you think, Governor? 60 seconds, please. Would our elderly have been better protected if we'd been more aggressive with this virus right up front?
So a couple of things. You're absolutely right. Vermont's done a great job. Phil Scott and I work very closely. They've done a great job with it. But let's be very clear. Senator Feltus just said we got testing and PPE early. Early on in this pandemic, Senator Feltus was at home. And it was Dr. Ben Chan and myself and Lori Shibanette who actually used to run long-term care facilities. So to say that we didn't listen to experts, we had some of the best experts in the country right here helping us make these very tough decisions. And I was talking to Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci one-on-one on these issues. So we tackled these issues head on. We have the most aggressive sentinel testing program in the country. In the country, we test more folks in long-term care, both residents and nurses, than any other state because we were so good and aggressive about getting that testing. That had absolutely nothing to do with Senator Feltus. He was home for the first 3 months. And yes, they passed a bill on June 30th. 3 months after this whole thing had started, they came back for 2 days and passed a bill to do what we had already done. So that's just political talking point. We're going to have challenges in long-term care. Nothing we can't handle when we work with our experts and really focus on the stakeholders at risk.
All right. And coming up our next segment, Josh Rogers, our senior political reporter, will tackle some of the politics of this. Thank you both, gentlemen. We're going to take a very quick break. We'll be right back. This is The Exchange on NHPR.
You're listening to The Exchange on NHPR, news from New Hampshire and NPR. And from the reporters who brought you Bear Brook and Stranglehold, NHPR's new narrative news project, The List, launches this week with an hour-long special about the secrecy of police misconduct here in New Hampshire and across the country. Join us for The List Friday evening at 7 and again Saturday afternoon at 1 on NHPR and at nhpr.org. Support for NHPR comes from you, our listeners, and from New England College, committed to being a military-friendly school with consideration given to training, experience, and prior coursework. Information at nec.edu/military. M from Moral Law, helping clients with estate planning needs for new or existing plans. Locally owned, offering trust and estate services. Open and offering virtual consults. morallaw.com. You're listening to NHPR.
Welcome back to NHPR's candidate debate for New Hampshire governor. I'm Laura Kanoy, along with NHPR's senior political reporter, Josh Rogers. We're talking with Republican Governor Chris Sununu and his Democratic challenger, State Senator Dan Feltes. And Josh, we'll begin this next segment with you, please.
All right, Governor, we're going to move to leadership. You have 60 seconds.
So this is very specific to Sununu, but they're talking about how there's been basically free reins to spending the federal COVID money and what would happen if he was reelected. Should the public expect things to be different next time? So we'll listen to his answer.
Actually doing a deal for PPE or doing a deal for testing. It was literally minute by minute, 3 a.m. I had a phone to the guys in China on one side. I'm working with FEMA. We're working with everybody, the whole team to get it together. And you got to make decisions very quickly, which is exactly what the state of emergency allows a governor to do, to be very flexible. And we were incredibly successful with our nimbleness there. There are a lot of pieces of the state of emergency and the orders that are part of that I think the legislature should take over, right? In terms of, I hope we can keep the telemedicine stuff that I created and put into place for the pandemic. Let's keep that, permanent. There are certain things and certain restrictions I think that are going to have to stay in place more long term. And a lot of that absolutely should come before the legislature. But when Dan Feltes and the Democrats sued me to create bureaucracy, to slow things down, that would have been a disaster for the state of New Hampshire. And the fact that they frankly had the gall to think that bureaucracy is what you should input into a pandemic is the absolute wrong approach. And again, being nimble is one of the reasons why we've gotten such great results for the state.
Senator, I'll give you a quick follow-up there.
Sure. Now's not the time for victory laps. Again, Donald Trump gives himself an A+, Chris Sununu gives himself the gold standard. Now's not the time to pat yourself on the back. We got spikes. We got a plan for the future. We got to finally go forward with paid family and medical leave insurance. We got to finally stabilize our healthcare system. And I've been helping people all the way through this pandemic, people like Diane and Beth, who fell through the cracks in Chris Sununu's unemployment insurance system. Help them get unemployment. Help small business owners navigate this. And we made common sense progress on telemedicine. We actually codified that into law, passed a number of measures to move New Hampshire forward. But this is fundamentally an issue of working together.
Okay.
Chris Sununu.
I'm going to cut you off there. I have
Sure.
to go back to the governor. The intent of the question was, and maybe this is wishful thinking, is to envision a return to pre-pandemic world in which, when you were governor, when you were inaugurated last year, you said divided government, which is what voters chose, requires leaders to, quote, embrace a spirit of cooperation.
Sure.
Since then, you vetoed 78 bills.
I also
You've
signed
decided to let the state's highest court go without a chief justice for more than a year now because the executive council disagreed with your first choice, which is their prerogative. Given that, what evidence is there of your spirit of cooperation over the past 2 years?
I look, in the past year, I signed more legislation in 2019 with a Democrat legislature than Maggie Hassan ever did. That's not a knock on Maggie, don't get me wrong, but we got more done than even the 4 years that Maggie Hassan did. So we've signed lots of legislation. Did I say no to all of that extreme legislation that created taxes and fees and surcharges over $1 billion over the next 10 years? I vetoed. Yes, absolutely, we're going to say no to that. So we have a great record. And as for the executive council, that's exactly why I'm not putting forth a chief justice, because they put politics in. Because when Andy Volinsky and Deb Pignatelli and Mike Ryan said, well, you're a Republican, so we can't do it. I put forth Republicans, I put forth Democrats, and been successful. But when they let the ugliness of Washington politics invade in that process, that was wrong. And so I'm not going to put forth nominees to have to go through that.
Okay, I'll go to you, Senator, in a second, but I just want to follow up with the governor. I mean, you sat on the council. The governor proposes, the council disposes. You've got to get 3 votes. When you put up Attorney General McDonald to be Chief Justice, you knew you didn't have the votes to do so, and you chose
But I knew he was the most qualified candidate. He came with amazing support. Dozens of judges and lawyers, Democrats, said, this is the guy. but it was a political move by Deb Pignatelli and Andy Valinsky and Mike Cryans, who, frankly, that's a body I was on for years. And for 200 years, there was no politics involved. Right? I worked with John Lynch. I worked with Maggie Hassan. I worked with Republicans, Democrats. Amazing success through all the years until all of a sudden it came to a grinding halt because they let that type of attitude. There was no place for that in the state of New Hampshire. And I stood strong against it.
Politics on the council, I've never heard of it, Governor. But to you, Senator Feltus.
Thank you very much, Josh. So 79 pieces of legislation vetoed, 65 of which had bipartisan support. We're talking everything from net metering, job training, addiction treatment services, universal background checks, an independent bipartisan redistricting commission, waiver of insurance costs for COVID-19 testing and treatment. Bipartisan work. 3 bipartisan net metering bills. Paid family and medical leave insurance was bipartisan. The problem here is not a Democrat problem or a Republican problem. It's a Chris Sununu problem. And if we're going to move forward in a bipartisan, collaborative way, we got to win this race.
Senator, I've got a question for you on the leadership front. 60 seconds. You talk a lot about having been a legal aid lawyer and that the experience of representing people facing tough economic circumstances informs your approach to politics. But I want to ask about your administrative experience. What in your background suggests you're qualified as a manager to run a sprawling bureaucracy like New Hampshire's government?
Sure.
So the question they pass is, what is your leadership qualifications to run the state of New Hampshire?
Well, having been in managerial positions in multiple jobs that I've had throughout my career, I know how to, even if I try to do most things myself, I do know how to delegate tasks. And that's really what is needed. Instead of one person trying to do everything themselves, the executive branch does have a lot of departments where you need to make sure that you're putting people in charge of those various departments that themselves have good leadership skills. One thing that I have to my advantage is the ability to work with both Republicans and Democrats on various issues. And I've done this both just as a regular citizen and as a public interest lobbyist, where I've worked with Republicans on certain issues. I've worked with Democrats on other issues, such as the repeal of the death penalty, which the governor vetoed.
Business. It wasn't easy. It was a struggle. I had 800 employees I had to worry about every day. And Dan's constant shots at my family. Look, my mom was on the school board. My dad was on the planning board. He became governor. My brother was a senator. I have brothers on town committees. My sister runs a museum. My other sister was a teacher. That's service, not career politicians. That is absolute service. That's what New Hampshire is all about. And I could not be prouder of the service my family has given this state. And for him to constantly take shots at my family and constantly take shots because I ran my family business, we did a great job. And I work
Governor,
with those
I'm
individuals. But again, that kind of negativity and attack ads, it's unbelievable. Every ad this guy has is an attack. Every single ad on TV is an attack. Why is that, Dan?
Why? I don't understand.
30 seconds, Senator.
Well, first of all, let's just be clear here. Governor, you talk about your management of the ski resort as an issue. So I'm going to talk about it. And campaigns are about distinctions. I managed to save people's homes while you were working at the ski resort. And that's fine. But that's a difference of perspective. I help people struggling in their last economic crisis get back up on their feet. I saw the devastation of the budget cuts in the Great Recession. I've seen the devastation of the budget cuts that Chris Sununu is doing right now to people on the ground. And on day one, I'm going to manage that budget to look out for ordinary people, and working families.
You can't sue your way out of a crisis. You can't lawyer your way out. You got to manage. You got to build teams. You got to lift people up with positivity.
Yeah,
but
that's exactly why the State Employees Association supports my campaign.
Gentlemen, please don't interrupt each other. Josh, go ahead, please.
My campaign.
Okay, Senator, one more to you. You promised to make support for abortion rights a litmus test on all judicial picks and promised to nominate a pro-choice woman to the New Hampshire Supreme Court if you're elected. Are there other prerequisites you'd require of judicial nominees?
Well, I don't.
What requirements would you have to nominate nominees to the Supreme Court?
That they be lawyers, I would prefer someone with judicial experience. But as far as litmus tests, the only litmus test that I would have is, do they actually believe in supporting the New Hampshire Constitution, which is what they would be ruling on at the New Hampshire Supreme Court. I don't care what their personal position is on pineapple pizza or abortion. They're not going to be making decisions on that. They're going to be making decisions on the New Hampshire Constitution. Have their rulings consistently upheld the New Hampshire Constitution? That's my litmus test.
I've never once asked them, what political party are you from? I've never once said, where do you stand on this issue or that issue? Because when it comes to that kind of service, you got to know that folks know the Constitution. They know the law. They're not going to make judicial or emotional, legal in terms of judging on the law, or emotional decisions based on the bench, based on their political personality. It has to be a bipartisan, nonpartisan effort. There should be no litmus test on any issue for any judge. Well, that's the right way to do
Governor
it.
Sununu does have a litmus test.
I need to jump back in here, gentlemen, and I do apologize, but we do need to move on. Senator Feltus, we've used up all our time on this segment, and thank you very much for that spirited back and forth and for highlighting some of these issues that have been a part of this campaign. I do want to talk about another important issue, and that's race and policing. And Senator Feltus, to you first, please. The final report by the Governor's Commission on Law Enforcement Accountability covers, as you know, a wide range of topics concerning police and race, has been widely praised, and the governor has endorsed all 48 recommendations. How much more, Senator Feltus, would you do as governor? Or is this an area where you can say, good job? 60 seconds.
I support all those recommendations of that commission.
They're asking about the recommendations from I believe is the Police Oversight Commission that happened, and what other things would you like to add to those recommendations?
Yeah, so one of the things that was actually missing from this Police Oversight Commission, which actually had a much larger name, but one of the things that was missing was getting rid of qualified immunity and getting rid of prosecutorial immunity, which I realized prosecutorial immunity is outside the scope of looking specifically at the police departments. But when you combine those two things together, that winds up really harming our criminal justice system to where it's not about justice, it's about getting convictions. And when you have police that, unfortunately, in New Hampshire, can have a misconduct record, but that's not public, that's a problem. We know that the police officer in Minneapolis that killed George Floyd had, I believe it was either 17 or 18 misconduct records on his reports on his record. If that were in New Hampshire, we wouldn't know because the Lori list is private. That should be a public record. There should be records of every use of force, and that should be a public record. There should be compiled data quarterly on how many use of force reports had been filed in the previous quarter, plus what the outcomes of those are.
He's currently addressing racism, and he's calling out Trump and Sununu, not equivocally denouncing everything that Trump has talked about.
Are you wanting my response on this?
Sure, if you'd like.
Yeah, so unfortunately, New Hampshire is not immune to systemic racism. And if you look at the current jail and prison populations in New Hampshire, you see that people of color are about 5 times more likely to be incarcerated than somebody that looks like me. And a lot of that is because of the war on drugs, where you have people that are going to jail for simple possession. I would love to see Portugal-style depenalization of all substances for personal use. And in Portugal, they refer to personal use as a 10-day supply. Do you know what a 10-day supply gets you in New Hampshire, the supposed live free or die state? It gets you possession with intent to distribute charges. That's not live free or die to me.
Black Lives Matter has issued a series of demands and asking about they're asking for legislation to remove qualified immunity. Is this a proposal you support?
Most definitely. And I even have that listed on my website on my list of issues. If you go to darrylwperry.com/issues, and then you click on criminal justice reform, you will see that one of the things that I want to do is get rid of both qualified and prosecutorial immunity. And of course the governor doesn't support this. The governor doesn't believe that systemic racism exists in New Hampshire.
I don't support removing qualified immunity. I've been very clear about that. Look, the protection there for police officers and others is common sense, public service protections, and taking the municipality or the town off the hook takes off the hook the systemic change that could possibly be implemented. And individual police officers, quite frankly, in terms of the amount of money that they could give in a legal redress, is not the same as a town or city. So look, it's about making sure that there's justice and access to justice.
Thank you, Senator Feltus. And Josh, back to you, please.
We're going to move to the environment and energy issues, and this is for you, Governor. A minute on this one. Last week, you were the lone governor of New England not to sign on to a letter to the regional grid manager, ISO, asking for a grid that would be more supportive of renewable energy. At the same time, New Hampshire has the lowest renewable energy usage goal in the region, the lowest caps on rooftop solar power, all things that have lowered emissions and created jobs in other states. Why should the people of New Hampshire be comfortable with us being an outlier regionally on these fronts? 1 minute.
The question was in regards to environment and not signing on to make our grid more towards renewables, and what should we do about energy, renewables, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so we actually need to wind up removing some of the restrictions that currently exist that prohibit or greatly discourage the use of renewable energy. We have all sorts of subsidies for the fossil fuel industry, and we have regulations that encourage the use of fossil fuels. And again, this is government picking winners and losers. The government should not be involved in this at all. It should be up to the free market. And unfortunately, that is not something that we have in this heavily regulated industry. We need to get government out of the way.
And he's currently talking about offshore drilling. You'd like to address that?
Yeah, again, the allowance of offshore drilling, you're granting special privilege to certain industries, just like some of the proposals for offshore wind, which the real difference is with offshore wind, there's a much lower risk of polluting the environment. One of the benefits to offshore wind, unlike something such as the Northern Pass, is you don't have to rely on eminent domain to wind up taking the land from people because nobody owns the ocean. And again, this is one of those things to where government is attempting to pick winners and losers and should not be doing that.
This year, the push is on to get out the Latino vote. But a new book is taking on the myth of a monolithic community by elevating often unheard voices inside one of our most diverse populations. Author Paola Ramos on nuanced identity and how that's transforming what it means to be American. Next time on 1A.
That's This Morning at 10 here on NHPR, News from New Hampshire and NPR. Support for NHPR comes from your listeners and from Granite State College, offering accredited bachelor and master's degree programs in nursing and healthcare management. Registration and information at granite.edu. And from Capital Roofing, offering installation and repair of residential roofs throughout New Hampshire. More at capitalroofingNE.com. You're listening to NHPR.
Welcome back to NHPR's candidate debate for New Hampshire governor. I'm Laura Kanoy, along with NHPR senior political reporter Josh Rogers. And this hour, we are talking with incumbent Republican Governor Chris Sununu and his Democratic challenger, Concord State Senator Dan Feltes. And gentlemen, I want to turn to mental health. But just before the break, we were having a bit of back and forth about climate change, and I did want to give both of you a little bit more opportunity to jump in there. So, Governor Sununu, you first, 30 seconds. You were invoked. Senator Feltes said you don't believe in climate change. I'd like to give you a chance to clarify there, please.
Of course I believe in climate change. Humans contribute to climate change. It's something we've been saying this came up in 2018, and we dealt with that it came up before, and we dealt with it. So, again, I know Dan likes to have a nice political talking point and with the lies and all of this kind of stuff, but at some point, you have to look at the accountability. The fact that Dan just said that with all these hundreds of millions of dollars in subsidies that I vetoed, that somehow that was going to raise rates. We did just the exact opposite. Solar energy, renewable energy, requires subsidies. And again, you can have that balance and you can make those investments, but you can't put over $1 billion. That's what those bills added up to, over $1 billion in subsidies. There's just a smarter way to do it than saying yes to everything.
Let's move on to the mental health crisis that we're still seeing in our state. Yeah, 30 seconds, please, and then I really do want to move on. Thank you.
Look, these are the governor's own words. These aren't lies. The governor said the jury is out on climate change. He attacks the science just like Trump attacks the science. It's no surprise he calls himself a Trump guy through and through. We got to move forward on clean energy in the state of New Hampshire. The vetoes of clean energy, solar, distributed generation, energy efficiency have resulted in rates going up on everyday Granite Staters.
That's absolutely true. Hundreds of millions of dollars.
True.
It's not like a couple bucks here, Dan. It's hundreds of millions.
And these are bipartisan pieces of legislation that were vetoed. That could have moved us forward.
I have a question for you, Senator Feltes. You keep saying that the governor said the jury is out on climate science. When were those statements made? Do you know?
A few years ago, but he said it.
That's convenient.
It is convenient. Well,
I mean, Dan, you can't just keep saying things and have nothing to back it up.
So here's my question, Governor Sununu. Have your views evolved on climate change? Did you used to feel that the jury was still out, and
Let me tell you
your
something.
views have changed?
I'm an environmental engineer. I worked as an environmental engineer for over 10 years. I went to MIT. My job was cleaning up hazardous waste, chlorinated solvents out of soil and groundwater, designing the exact systems that we're talking about. This is what I do. It's kind of at the core, and those experiences are what drive a lot of the decisions that we make today. But at the end of the day, if we say no to a couple bills because they cost hundreds of millions of dollars, I vetoed those bills. I'll veto them again because there's always a better way to do it by focusing the effort not in these big companies, but focusing those solar panels on those that can afford it the least.
Okay, from one crisis to the next, from climate to mental health. And Senator Feltes, you get first crack at this, please.
Sure.
They're asking about what's available for children in mental health. The bill last year sent more money to mental health, and a lot was for children's. According to the Concord Monitor, very few steps outlined in the bill have taken place. Senators on the Ways and Means Committee, what has he been doing to push it forward? But I guess you can talk about just mental health in general in regards to. No? All right.
Just.
All right. They will continue to listen to them.
No, June of this year and spring of this year. And we did lead the way. A statewide mobile crisis intervention and stabilization team for children at risk, whether child protection involved or not, keeping them out of the emergency room, giving the needed, timely, and necessary mental health treatment in their community. You know, if you break a leg or you have a heart attack, you get medical care right away. Mental health, not so much in New Hampshire right now under this administration. We have 27 kids that are waiting in emergency rooms, waiting for mental health treatment that could have been taken care of had the bill that I authored and worked on actually been implemented by Chris Sununu. He didn't implement it. He just went out to an RFP, request for proposal, last week. And there's no greater reflection of society than the way it treats its children. In the words of Nelson Mandela, I will stand up those services, those mental health services, look out for our children and our families every step of the way.
Well, and same question to you, Governor Sununu, on mental health, and $20 million allocated to improve it last year. And yet we have a spike, as Senator Feltes said, in people waiting for psychiatric beds, many of them children. It's heartbreaking. Why are we still seeing this problem, Governor Sununu, given years of attention, money on this issue? One person said, we don't have a money issue, we have a timing issue. We need to move forward. What's the holdup?
So let's understand that just before the pandemic, the wait in emergency rooms was zero. Absolute zero. Lori Shibinette and her experience and her team, by making those investments, by doing the right thing. Now, the pandemic has created a whole variety of issues for folks, isolation issues for kids and adults. And so, yes, we saw the numbers spike up again, but you can't use the pandemic as the example. We've shown that we have the model to get that number to zero. We've made the investments in the DRF beds across the communities, the transitional housing, more than ever before. We inherited one of the worst mental health crises in 2017 than any administration in history. We've made progress and actually passed legislation on suicide prevention. We've passed legislation allowing teachers to get that training on mental health issues because they're such a big part of the solution. We're moving kids out of New Hampshire Hospital into Hampstead, where they actually have a more kid-friendly environment. We're expanding our beds at the Philbrook House. So I could go on all day. Dan talks about one contract that went out last week, but we've passed 25 contracts in the past 2 years to make all of these investments across the state, and we have a model that has shown to work. Pandemic's a little different, and again, we're not backing away from that challenge, but we know the model can work, and as we work through these issues, we know we can get back to zero, which, again, I'm the first governor to get that number to zero in ages. So we're very proud of what we've been able to do, but there's still so much more work and so many more folks that are counting us to get back to what we'd call normal in a normal system post-pandemic.
Well, and Josh Rogers, I'm going to throw it back to you. Thank you both.
Like it or not, in a presidential election year, the top of the ticket looms large, and looming particularly large is President Trump. And Governor, this question is for you. As we've heard today, and as you well know at this point, Democrats very much want to make this race in large measure about a comment you made in May of 2019 about the challenge that former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld was mounting in the Republican presidential primary against President Trump. I'm a Trump guy through and through, you said. Do you still feel that way? And if not, why?
Well, look, you see all these ads, right? Every ad that Dan puts out is an attack ad. Dan wants to be governor, but he talks more about Donald Trump than he does about ideas for the state of New Hampshire. And this, I'm actually keeping score. You're up to 20. You've actually named him 20 times in one debate, Dan, over 25 last night. If you're running for governor, you got to come with solutions and real ideas. Look, I'm the head of the party, the Republican Party in New Hampshire. I support the ticket. I support the president. I'm going to vote for him. I don't think that's a shock to anybody, frankly. They've been trying to go down this path for 4 years now. I call the balls and strikes like I see them. When Donald Trump called us a drug-infested den, we stood up on it. When he wasn't clear about the racism and the statements made down in Charlottesville or even just a few weeks ago, we stood up and said unequivocally, there's no place for that kind of gray area, if you will. When FEMA wasn't giving us the testing materials, we stood up and said they have to do a better job. So, look, I'm New Hampshire through and through. I'm a New Hampshire guy, and I'm always going to fight for what gives us that advantage. But I'm also going to work, whether it's Trump or Biden or Clinton or Obama. I don't care who's president. I'm going to work with whoever president to get the best results for our state.
I mean, you say as a Republican you'll support the ticket. There are other Republican governors, Charlie Baker, Phil Scott, Larry Hogan, have said they won't or haven't voted for President Trump. And, it's true you've criticized the president, and, you said you tried to watch the presidential debate with your daughter and ended up turning it off in disgust. But do you still think 4 more years of President Trump is the best option for the country right now?
So when we look at...
Yeah, so you know what I am? I'm a liberty guy through and through. You know what my campaign ads have been about? They've been about things that we would have in this state if it weren't for Governor Chris Sununu. We would have an independent redistricting commission because he vetoed that. We would have legalized cannabis because he threatened a veto, and that caused the state Senate to kill the legislation. New Hampshire is an island of prohibition when it comes to cannabis legalization. We can legalize cannabis, set our tax rate lower than any of our neighbors, and once again get that New Hampshire advantage. But it seems like Governor Chris Sununu doesn't want the New Hampshire advantage. He wants the Sununu advantage.
And he is addressing, are you better off after 4 years of Trump and Sununu? You would like to...
In what way? Financially, no. In regards to overall freedoms, not any more free. I'm personally not less free. There are a lot of people that are, because President Donald Trump has signed in more gun restrictions at the federal level than Obama did. But because Trump's a Republican, the NRA supported every single one. Because somehow suppressor and a bump stock aren't firearms, they're firearm accessories. And of course, a lot of college students are being harmed by the increase in the tobacco age, to where if they're trying to buy some cigarettes, not that I encourage people smoking cigarettes, but if they attempt to in certain towns, and actually, no, because it passed statewide, they're now being treated as criminals.
That actually went federal.
I didn't realize it was federal now.
Yes, it's federal.
Wow. Are we still muted?
Nope.
Based on your conduct in the edit board, make you think that maybe you've underestimated voters' capacity to assess the governor on his own record?
No. And you know what? We have plans for the future. We have a healthcare plan to reduce costs and increase access. Under Chris Sununu, the uninsured rate gone up triple the uninsured under Chris Sununu. Highest healthcare costs in the nation under Chris Sununu, even prior to the pandemic. We put forward a comprehensive healthcare plan to move forward, including on behavioral health. We put forward a comprehensive housing plan to move forward, building on the bipartisan initiatives. So we have a vision to lift up working people and working families. We haven't heard any plans from Chris Sununu, none, about why he is running for a rare third term as governor. So look, this is about lifting up the struggles of working people and working families, those left out and left behind. The economy is not working for everyone. And to say it is, which Chris Sununu has said recently, is just not true. And you know it. So we need to turn the page on the Trump-Sununu agenda and look out for working people and working families once and for all.
Let's be clear. Dan Feltus says he's out fighting for working families, but he passed 2 income taxes that I had to
That is absolutely not true.
He's
absolutely not true.
Dan Feltus says he's going to create jobs, but when I asked him to not put in the 13% business taxes, they said no. And we had to manage through that. And luckily, with my administration, we didn't get the business tax increase. Dan Feltus says he wants to create opportunities for kids and rejected $46 million from the federal government to open up opportunity and expansion of public charter schools. You're all talk, Dan. At the end of the day, you have to bring results. And look at the results in our state. Lowest COVID numbers, one of the strongest economies, opportunity at an individual level, 85% of our schools open, no outbreaks in schools. These are the results that people are expect when they have anxieties in a pandemic. And this is the leadership and management experience we're going to need in 2021 to bring our economy back and keep our community safe.
All right, Laura's going to have anxieties about the clock if we don't move on.
I'm willing to give you another 30 seconds, Josh, if you would, with Senator Feltus, and then we do have to move on. Thank you.
I'd veto an income tax. I've been very clear about that.
You wrote the income tax
twice. No,
that's
not true. That's not true. We're talking about paid family medical leave insurance, which Chris Sununu opposes. And what does that mean?
3 bills that were paid family leave, you said no to all of them.
Give him his time, please.
3 bipartisan bills. People who need the help. Diane, story of Diane, who has battling breast cancer, didn't have access to paid family medical leave insurance. Her daughter had to make a GoFundMe page. People in COVID not having access to paid medical leave. And this is what it's all about, making sure we take care of our families. And it's paid for just like Social Security. And it's pretty simple. And I don't hear the governor calling Social Security income tax. The fact of the matter is I've been standing up for working people and working families my entire life. And it's a flat-out lie that this is an income tax.
Dan's words in that bill,
Governor
payments shall equal 0.5% per wages per employee per week. Those are his words in both bills. Everybody pays, no matter how much you make. Low-income families, everybody pays. So that's an income tax. Payments, that's a tax. Shall equal wages, that's your income. You can use whatever linguistic gymnastics, but you put forth 2 income tax bills. And when given my plan, which was an option on paid family leave, because I support it, You chose the one with the income tax. You showed your priorities right there in that moment. We could have had paid family leave today because
is absolutely
because you knew I'd vote for the bill that I put forward.
And Senator
but when you
Feltus,
put
you
forward
have
the income
30
tax,
seconds,
you
and
made
then
your
let me
priorities
just make it very clear.
Very clear.
Very clear.
30 seconds, Senator Feltus.
Chris Sununu
and then
had
we're
no
done.
plan. No plan.
3 bills?
It
Isn't
was
a
a
plan,
status. Hold on a second.
3 bills.
Come on, Governor. Status quo with tax breaks for big corporations. Not one person supported his bill. It was not a bill. It was just an effort so he could say in this election that he supports it. He's running for a 3rd term, so to support it each of the first 2 terms. Did not get it done. These were bipartisan bills for paid family and medical leave insurance. Democrats and Republicans on the bill. It's not a Democrat problem or a Republican problem. The failure to move forward on paid family leave is a Chris Sununu problem.
I'll never
Okay.
support an income tax, ever. I promise that to the state of New Hampshire.
Neither will I.
Last question for both of you gentlemen, and 15 seconds, please. Who in the opposite party, a living person, so you can't say Abraham Lincoln or FDR, who in the opposite party do you respect the most? And Senator Feltus, to you first, 15 seconds, please.
Well, I would think that.
Well, considering that as a libertarian, I've got multiple opposite parties, I would actually say that Representative Will Pearson from Keene is who in the Democratic Party I respect the most, because he's actually done the most in trying to get some ballot access reform introduced and pushed through in the New Hampshire legislature. As far as Republicans, that's much tougher, just because there's a lot of people that like to claim to be allies that then wind up voting in the complete opposite interest of what they claim to support.
And they are not having closing statements. They are just wrapping it up. So if you would like to have a closing statement, I guess you could have one.
Yes, I would love to have a closing statement. Again, Darryl Perry, Libertarian for governor. And as was mentioned earlier in this debate, the sitting governor has a 20-point lead over the Democratic challenger. And depending on which poll you look at, I'm anywhere between 0 to 4%, and I seriously don't understand how 2 polls released the same day had me at those 2 extremes. I believe that I'm much closer to that 4% than 0. I would encourage college students specifically who are very receptive to libertarian ideals to go out and vote libertarian. If I receive 4% of the vote, then the Libertarian Party in 2 years is not going to have to spend nearly $20,000 just trying to get on the ballot. The Republicans and Democrats don't have to do this because they have set the rules so that their candidates are automatically on the ballot. Yes, they might have a primary, or in the case of Governor Sununu, the illusion of a primary where he wound up winning with close to 90% of the vote. But the Libertarians, we had to spend nearly $20,000, sue the governor, and waste hundreds, if not thousands of hours of volunteer time. If I get 4% of the vote, we don't have to do that in 2 years. And if I win this election, I will work with the legislature to implement Vermont-style ballot access, where any organized party gets their candidates automatically on the ballot. Also, I will work with the legislature to repeal the war on drugs, legalize cannabis, so that we are not that island of prohibition, and we again have that New Hampshire advantage. You can go to my website, darrylwperry.com, to learn out or to find out more and learn more about my positions. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this special from Darryl W. Perry and the New Hampshire gubernatorial debates.